Welcome to Adorned in Tradition, a quick but substantial tour through the Indigenous Colombian jewelry and their cultural identity. Before talking about art, handcraft, and jewelry, let's locate Colombia in the map so we can understand why, when we talk about indigenous jewelry, we have to connect to the territory. Colombia is located in the northern west corner of South America, a very advantaged location, we could say, because we have coasts in both oceans, the Atlantic and the Pacific. Also, a third part of the national territory is covered by the Amazon's jungle. And coming from the south, the Andean mountain chain lies here in a trifurcation that goes all the way through the north. Can you imagine that we have perpetual snow by the coast and in between there is a jungle? This is important because the indigenous people from the Amazons are not prepared to adapt or to live in the mountain as the Muiscas indigenous group do. And the Paeses could probably not survive in the jungle. Their relationship to their territory is one of the most important characteristics of the Colombian indigenous people, which is portrayed in their cultural material, including their jewelry. But how different it can be? Well, we have the Andean region where the Guambiano, Paeses, and Muiscas, among other indigenous people, live. It is cold, so we need warm clothes, colorful clothes, of course. In this region, we found the largest cities, and believe it or not, close to 80% of the total Colombians live here. Then we have the Amazons, where most of the pictures representing indigenous people come from. This is a region with difficult access, so the indigenous people that live here don't have a lot of contact with outsiders. The Bora, Ticuna, and Yucuna are only 3 of the several contacted indigenous groups in this region. And the Caribbean, the blue waters and nice weather. Here we have special indigenous groups. The Cuna used to be nomads and had free transit between Panama and Colombia, but sadly, due to the armed conflicts and the recent massive migration through the Darien, they have mostly settled in Panama. The ga.eu is the only matriarchal group in the country, and the Icas are the philosophers. This group, the Icas, Koi, Wiwas, and Cuancuamo, chew coca leaves to cope with the altitude of the Sierra Nevada and to connect with their ancestral knowledge. The Pacific region is mostly a tough jungle. There we find the Embera and the Waunana, and they share their territory with the Afro-descendants, who are also protected by the Colombian state. And lastly, we have the Eastern Plains, our local cowboys version. Here, the Guaibos and the Hu big families live. To give you a general idea about the indigenous people of Colombia, there are 83 different groups, each of them with their own language and their own tradition. We classify them in 5 big linguistic families, but this is just to be able to recognize them and to group them. They make up to the 5% of the total Colombian population, which is around 50 million. And only them, that means this 5% of the population, own the 30% of the total territory throughout the entire country. Indigenous people are very important. They are protected by law. Colombia is declared a pluriethnic country and it applies customized law. Indigenous culture and cosmology are represented in handcraft and jewelry. Most of us, the rest of Colombians, admire their culture. But they've had a huge battle to preserve their identity. Mostly, they have achieved this by preserving the language and their cultural material. It is actually thanks that their cultural material has become a commodity, what we now call handcraft, that we have access to it. However, before art of handcraft, these objects are part of their daily life. These are objects they use in their daily activities such as hunting, fishing, but also worshipping. Before writing, they used to portray their thoughts, their feelings, and their religion into these objects. So those beautiful lines you see now in some handcrafts are actually imprinted culture. In these objects, we can also discover a little bit of their social structure, their cosmology, made beauty, and their sense of belonging. Nature plays an important role for their inspiration, not only due to the patterns, but because nature itself means everything for them. Handcraft is then not only a way of expression and reassuring their cultural identity, it is also a way for differentiation and to celebrate diversity. In these pictures from my personal archive, you can see some indigenous people from different groups using some of the artifacts we call handcrafts for their daily activities. Here, a look from their architecture. Their constructions are also built in absolute coherence and harmony with their environment. One of the materials used for handcrafting by indigenous communities are the beads. They are introduced by colonizers during colony in all the American continent. Each indigenous group adopted it to their own cosmology, replacing bones and stones. You can find leather bells with beads in Argentina, golden figures combined with shells in Peru, and jewelry in Colombia. The most known jewelry due to its beauty and complexity is the one made by the Embera women. Among these people, the most complex the waves of the color, the higher is the status of the woman that carries it. Its figures recreate aspects of the nature that surrounds them and which are deities themselves. The jewelry that you see today is made by women mainly from three indigenous groups, from the Kamentsa, the Embera, from the Chami family group, and the Inga. Kamentsa, like almost all the names of the indigenous communities, means people in their own language. This community is located in the south of Colombia in the Putumayo state, and most specifically in the Simundoy Valley. This area is a transition between the Amazon regions and the Pacific, and is largely covered by jungle. This community is known by their chamans, or taitas, how they call them in their language. They are men who preserve the oral tradition of the Kamentsa people. They are also very important spiritual leaders, not only for their own community, but since some time ago, they are also very often visited by people from all over the country and from different parts of the world. They are become well known due to their transformative guidance and support for self-knowledge. Their fame is extensive also due to the preparation and ritual use of the ayahuasca, or capi, or yahe, a plant that prepared in combination with other plants connects you to your subconscious. The Kamentsa indigenous group have a profound connection with nature, which is reflected in their rituals, their cosmology, and their cultural material, including their handcrafts. In their culture, they coined this concept, which is one of the principles and which means mutual reciprocity. The Embera indigenous group used to be nomad, but due to colonization, they settled where they live now. A very important part of their culture is the relationship and association to spiritual creatures and nature, especially with water. Their haibanas, or the shamans, have an important spiritual role, among them being one of their main tasks to maintain nature in balance. Embera handcrafting design is heavily influenced by this. The Embera people are divided in 4 groups: Catío, Chami, Dóvida, and Siapidara, depending on where they have settled. Catío people live by the river, Dóvida in the south, and Siapidara in the north. Chami people live in the mountains and are who have created this handcraft you see today here. The Embera Chami is one of the 34 indigenous groups declared in danger of extinction due to the internal armed conflict in Colombia. Colors are of extreme importance for Embera Chami culture, and women use them since they are very little. Embera considered that women carry all the weight of the world on their shoulders, and the colors represents this weight. The colors are known as okama in their language and mean the walk around the neck. Their design is very complex, and the complexity is equivalent to the social status of the owner. Each color and shape has a meaning. The Inca people are direct descendants of the Quechua Empire, which were mostly located in Bolivia and Peru. In the northern limit of the empire, they settled in the south of Colombia. Same as the Kamentsa, their spiritual tradition uses ayahuasca or capi or yahe, and they consider that all the 4,000 people of their community is just one big family. Inca women wave as a way to perpetuate and to transmit their tradition, and this happens mostly in informal settings around the fire when food is being prepared. In this way, the youngest can see and learn the art of weaving, but also they learn from their history. Quillacinga represents not only the beauty of the colors and the patterns. This jewelry represents also the feminine thoughts, their understanding of the world, and the role of the women within the indigenous groups. It also represents a strong sense of belonging, a way of expression and communication, and an entire culture itself, with love shared with you.